Asanteni sana. We want to start our program for today. We only have 3 panels. It's going to be a short one. And our first panel for today will be the e-mobility and battery, led by one of our sponsors, event sponsors, GIZ. So I want to call upon Robert.
We are having a panel on e-mobility, and I'd like to call upon my panelists. I'll start with John Msingo from Kabisa. You can clap for him. Engineer David Mugambi from Kenya Power. Francis Romano from Drive Electric. Sheila Kipkorir from Collective Energy Africa. And Dr. Gladys Kerubo from Circular Economy Powered Renewable Energy Center. So welcome all to this panel session. I think the beauty about it is that as much as it's on day 2, we have a showcase as to why it is an important conversation this morning. And we're lucky to have an EV outside there, a repurposed battery out there, and a 2-wheeler out there. And I think my panelists will agree that we keep making headlines, or they keep making the headlines, we keep reading them. So our panel discussion today is on fleet electrification and battery innovation, unlocking the new CNI load frontier in Africa. And I'm joined here by a wonderful pool of experts from different institutions covering different sectors, but all of them speak to the same thing. And the beauty about it is that it's a circular panel, in that someone here will talk about generation of power, someone will talk about consumption, and at the tail end, there's a discussion on battery repurposing and recycling. So we'll start, and I'll just want to set the stage. The Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority recently released statistics, and I just wanted to read something that I saw in the statistics. So in the year review, media review, the full year review for last year, they noted a growth in e-mobility. And in terms of energy consumption, Engineer Mugambi, they mentioned that electricity consumption was under the electric mobility category, including electric vehicles and motorcycles, rose by 152.49% from 1.8 gigawatt hours in the previous year to 4.57 gigawatts during the review period. So this, I think that will be the backbone of what we are discussing in terms of energy consumption. And e-mobility right now is a good demand driver. And as a country in the energy space, we've been talking about how to increase our demand. So I'll start with just a short snippet. Kenya today has a unique paradox that we've invested heavily in generation capacity, particularly renewable energy, yet demand growth has not kept pace. At the same time, our transport sector remains heavily dependent on imported fossil fuels. So the question we must ask is, can we solve both challenges together? What if electric mobility, particularly fleets, become not just a decarbonization tool, but a new, flexible, and scalable source of electricity demand? And beyond that, what if the batteries powering these vehicles evolve into distributed energy assets that support the grid itself? So today's discussion is about connecting these dots, transport, energy, and infrastructure, and understanding what it will take to unlock this opportunity in the Kenyan context. So welcome, my dear panelists. I think we'll start with Engineer Mugambi, given that the utility Kenya Power plays a huge role. So given the current, Kenya's current load curve and surplus generation at off-peak periods, how significant could electric fleets become as a new demand segment in the next 5 to 10 years? And the fundamental question is this being integrated in demand planning?
It is true, as you have mentioned, that we need to plan for this demand. But looking at our current load curve, as you have mentioned, these are the exact conditions that make EV fleets significant. In that our peak demand is between 2,300, 2,400. On December 12, we recorded actually 2439 megawatts on 4th December, sorry. The evening peak, which is between 7 and 9, while the off-peak is from midnight. From midnight up to morning, we have a demand of about 1,000 to 1,300. Therefore, that leaves us with a gap of about 1,000. And looking into the fact that Kenya's baseload is mostly geothermal, and we also have wind, which is quite significant. And this cannot be basically stored for the following day. I understand even wind spins are high at night. Therefore, we have potential if we could be able to shift our load, changing load during this space. So, our problem at the moment, as much as we have grid constraints, it is not generation per se, but timing that generation or timing the demand to be able to match the generation. We are also looking at the need to utilize this off-peak capacity. And when we look at our current projections for vehicles, technically we are looking conservatively in the next 5 years to have about 5,000 big EVs consuming around 150 megawatts. This would translate basically to about 750 megawatt hours per day. If you spread that over 6 hours, you realize that's about 125 megawatts continuously for 6 hours. That means we can actually power that within that capacity of 1,000 a night. If you look at the higher demand side, or high aggressive, we are looking at about 20,000 vehicles. And those will translate to about 3,000 megawatts. If you put that across 6 hours between, say, midnight and morning, that's about 500. That means that capacity of about 1,000 at night, if we are able to bring in our load, shift our load, such that we consume that energy at that time. I think the other issue was about introducing it to planning. I can say for sure, yes. Right now, it's quite significant from what you mentioned. The growth of the EV loans has made it necessary for the industry to start planning to put it EV loans, both projected, current, and the future into the planning, both generation, transmission, and distribution. Currently, of course, our major challenge would be in distribution, which is mostly localized. Some areas might have constraints, not because there is no energy, but because we have constraints. So it has become very significant that we factor this into the planning cycle. Thank you.
In my second question to John, John works for Kabisa Electric. Let me just introduce him. And because Kabisa right now are doing really well, they are going into truck electrification. So if we match that idea of 1,000 megawatts that is available and what this new innovative company wants to do, I think it's good to get insights as to whether the potential demand and the predictability of electricity is as per the user. So John, I think the first thing is I'll prompt you to talk about a bit of, like for just a second, about your prime movers that you've introduced in a different market and whether they'll come to Kenya. And also match and tell us whether if they come to Kenya, how predictable is our energy, and whether you see any consistent daily load profiles that the utilities can play around to match what you need to consume.
We brought in prime movers. So Kabisa has been in existence for the last 3.5 years. And in that 3.5 years, we've sold over 300 vehicles. Robert, you started by asking me why they are not in Kenya yet. Rwanda has favorable policies towards e-mobility. I'll not add any more. I'll just say that and leave that there. Yeah. Now, in as much as Rwanda has those favorable policies and what we are seeing from our customers, so a customer over the 3 years, customer will start with one, try it out, sees that it actually works, buy the second one, buy the third one. So most of our customers, especially the fleet customers, now they are on their 8th, 9th vehicle, right? We expect similar growth here in Kenya. And I want to tie that with what Mr. Mugambi was talking about. Across all, in terms of all the different electric vehicles that are present. So we're talking about motorcycles, buses, trucks, etc. You'll find that you have the users and the times that they actually use them. The time that you have the highest demand, which is between 7 and 9, what happens is that that's when majority of them are making the most money in terms of, that's the time that all of us are in traffic, right? So you have your cab guys, that's the time that they're rushing to be able to just make that shilling, right? You have your buses, that's the time that they're trying to transport people. But after 9 o'clock, 9:30, now you start slowing down. So what you find is that e-mobility in it of itself, it just really, really works and does not stress the grid. As Mr. Mugambi has given out numbers here, you could have 5,000 EVs and still that won't affect the grid negatively. I hope that with the 5,000, you can reduce the cost of power. Yeah, thank you.
So now I'll go into a battery session. Romano there is in both worlds, but today we'll move him into the circularity. But now to the battery innovation and circularity questions, we'll start with Dr. Gladys here, who's seated next to me from SEPREC. So what practical pathways exist in Kenya for repurposing EV batteries into stationary storage? And what policy or market gaps need to be addressed to scale this?
Thank you very much, Robert. I'm yet to be doctor. I don't want people here to... Thank you very much. I'm on that journey. But as it has been well said, is that we are seeing a trajectory where we are going to have quite a bit of fleets in terms of electric mobility, especially when from the work we are doing in SEPREC, when we do the projections, is by 2040, we are seeing from the simulations about 30% of the population will actually be electric mobility. And in that case, then we are also seeing that in terms of second life batteries or batteries that cannot be favorable for high performance e-mobility will be about 1 million to 2 million, thereabouts. So what then happens to these packs of batteries from EVs? So the pathways that we are seeing, because we want to see whether we can have commercial viability of end-of-life batteries from high-performance mobility, e-mobility rather. One is BESS for stationary applications, because at 70 to 80% of capacity from e-mobility, we can still extend this life of batteries to be used as storage for stationary applications for another about 8 to 10 years. So as we are looking at demand for for energy, especially if we're talking about charging of these vehicles. And as John has said, that e-mobility is not stressing the grid. We are trying to see, can these charging stations therefore actually use renewable sources as one of the generation. But now on that, we want to see if these batteries can be used for that, especially. The second pathway that we are seeing is critical minerals as raw materials from second life batteries. And I don't know, most of you might be knowing this anyway because you're in the sector. Last year, China and Germany, who are the leaders of e-mobility, actually passed regulation in their countries that they can no longer export second life batteries. And this is because of their research and development, where they realized that critical minerals are for them a major source of income when it comes to raw materials. So we are talking cobalt, nickel, and lithium itself. So because of that, there is also commercial viability in terms of trying to retain these minerals for reusing them as raw materials for new batteries. So we are also looking, therefore, at affordable off-grid applications, especially for rural electrification, in my opinion. And this, I will want to give an example of what we have been trying to partner with EnviroServe. So what they have been doing is to try and repurpose lithium batteries, experimenting the use of these for especially schools in Turkana. But there is one that is ongoing for Banda School in Rongai, so that we can try to review and see, is it viable? Are they actually getting a return on investment from these? And just because these batteries are not from high performance mobility vehicles. So we're trying to see if these lithium batteries can actually be viable, then it means there is a business case for electric vehicle second life batteries. So those for me would be the first three pathways that I'm looking at as commercial viable pathways for second life batteries. However, the second part of your question, which was what gaps are we seeing, especially in the market and policy. I will be here trying to support John, very emphasizing his part of policy. Policy signals really are the ones that create an enabling environment for markets to thrive. It is the work of government to ensure that entrepreneurship thrives, or it is killed. So from where we sit, we see that there is a bit of policy incoherence when it comes to circularity. So we have the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Transport. They have what they want as their targets and, trying to see how do we enable, do we have tax incentives? Are we able to make it easier for imports and all that? Then we have the ministries that are, have the mandate of waste management. So you find that they also introduce policies now for EPR organizations and try to say, okay, if you don't do this, then we are going to fine you. We are going to. So that incoherence, you realize, cannot really enable circularity. So the feedback loops become a bit cut out and it's not viable. So if you tell Romano that, you need to do this, we are giving you a tax incentive of 8% instead of 16% on import duty. But then you tell him that on repurposing the battery that it's not possible because the Ministry of Environment has said that. Then he's looking at his company like something that is going to die. So where we sit is that policy incoherence for us is the major gap, and we have to have a systems thinking approach when we are having these ministries come up with some of these targets and mandates. I think I will stop there for now, and then we will continue.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gladys. I think let's keep the doctor. You will become a doctor. So actually, she's doing her PhD. That's why I'm calling her Dr. Gladys. I think she's just being modest. Probably you are almost completing your PhD. So I think you've brought out a couple of interesting points. Policy coherence. I'll say that because in a lot of the policy documents supporting the transport sector as well as e-mobility, there's a bit of incoherence. I think also that those are gaps which as a country we need to take up. And I liked the point about China and Germany having that law where you cannot export the second life batteries because of the critical minerals. So I think at some point with all this adoption that we have as a country and the adoption of the big boys, the buses and the trucks, because they will bring in a lot of batteries. We need to also relook into that and ensure that we derive as much value from these EVs. So next question is to Sheila from Collective Energy. So how can second life batteries be integrated into commercial and industrial energy systems, particularly for backup power or renewable integration?
Thank you so much for that question. From speaking in the perspective of where I come in, where in Collective Energy Africa we deal specifically with storage. We find that the storage that we put out in the market are so much costly. So when it comes to second life, it comes handy in reducing the cost of investment. So if you look at the incorporation of the C&I at the moment, a lot of uptake have been taken in the market without the incorporation of the battery because of the initial cost of the battery. So when it comes to the second life, it will help in now incorporating the existing solar systems to be able to shift the usage of power, not only during the day, but also at night. If you look at industrial area, for example, a lot of industries have put solar panels on their roof, but those solar panels can only operate during the day. And when we have gloomy days, like maybe July mostly, the production goes down. If we have the incorporation of the batteries, definitely it will help the industries continue the operation with the use of the batteries. Apart from that, my fellow speaker here, David, have said about the mini grids, the generation timing. You see, there's a lot of generation that is happening, but most of the time the power is lost because there's no storage. So when we have for example, geothermal Kengen, I think last year they were looking at having a storage capacity where if they have a generation more than what is being used at the moment, they can put batteries there so that they can be able to store it for usage in future, which will come in handy. At the same time, even the peak demand at night, where you have industries operating the EV vehicle charging at night, it could be able to help to shift the loads. Yeah. So, and also apart from that, Gladys have also talked about having mini grids in the rural areas. We have power lines not going to so many rural areas, especially when you look at the northeastern, the eastern part of Kenya. There is the southern part of Kenya, like Masai Mara. So we have a lot of people who are still in the dark, and we cannot have the power lines running there. So that is another way where we can use the second life, because definitely their consumption is not as much, and it doesn't affect the C rating of the batteries at that moment. So if we incorporate this second life in those mini grids there, it will reduce the cost of capex in the implementation phase, and at the same time we'll have more people access to power. Yeah. Apart from that, now, when we come back to our topic today, EVs, most example is Basigo. They operate during the day, and you find most of the time when we go back to when they're charging, most of them charge from maybe 10 p.m. when they have closed their work up to morning. So you find that for this to happen for more than 134 buses that are available in the market right now, they have to have big chargers that they can charge the vehicles maybe within an hour, 30 minutes. And this will definitely make the providers go back to requiring supply of power that is able to take over the charging. So when we have backup that is able to take power during the day, and at night it's just helping the charging of the vehicles, it will come in handy, and it will reduce even the costs.
So thank you so much. You've brought out a good point about expense of installing installing batteries as storage, and the way how we can integrate second life batteries, let's say from EVs into second life storage. But now I think there's a point that I've picked, and I think as a country we need to look at is regulations. So yes, we can deploy batteries like what Romano has showcased outside, but in the morning we were having a conversation, and I asked him whether this he has sold to anyone. And the first thing he said is, we do not have regulations and standards on this. So ideally, we can get to a point where we can actually test a repurposed battery, and it can be given a certification having met minimum standards as a second life battery, and be able to deploy them, as you say, in rural areas where the consumption is low. So I think that's something we need to pick up also in the further conversations with Romano when he tells us about his charger. So we'll move on swiftly to Romano. Today you're wearing a circularity hat. However, the EV that is there is still underdrive electric. But to my question, beyond charging, how viable is it today in Kenya to use EV batteries for ancillary services such as peak shaving or frequency support?
Thank you, Robert, for this question. Very, very interesting discussion on that. Just a little background of what we do. I come from a company called Knights Energy, which is a renewable energy company for quite a long time. Mark Hankins here will tell you. For many years, we've been moving around installing solar. But we've moved also into renewables for transport, and that is where the question of storage comes in. And transport is primarily going, in my early opinion, going to be powered by the grid. Primarily, it doesn't mean that renewables will not support that, but the grid still provides the framework of doing all that, which lays the foundation of what Engineer Robert is asking. Can storage play an additional role to grid ancillary services? So technically, yes. We have tried to put together scalable modular storage systems that can dispatch large capacity power. We've just put one module up here, but we can integrate those kind of modules to up to maybe 0.5 megawatt in our early designs. The first part of it, of course, is the technical viability. Are we able to build it to the requirements for fast response services that the grid really will demand? Yes, we're trying to do that, incorporating both the second life batteries on one hand, as well as other proprietary and off-the-shelf market technologies to ensure that the batteries can reliably respond in a very fast manner to dispatch power for whatever application. So that technical viability is possible. We have tested it. Of course, we're still trying to reach certain benchmarks for international performance, but yes, that is possible. What we still have to do is to design market structures where, of course, with the utility, with regulators, to be able to dispatch stored power to support the grid. This, until now, is not yet designed. And so, while the technical viability does exist, the commercial deployment is still not yet designed. It's still not yet acceptable because I think standards, regulations, and of course involving the utility is yet to be done. So those market structures might hopefully be the next topics we will be getting into. So how are we using it until now? We are using it behind the meter to be able to store sufficient power for our charging infrastructure applications, to also absorb renewables from our captive installations, particularly for charging infrastructure. And so this kind of behind the meter has the capability to provide us an assured price point on our charge points. It is able to increase, let's say, commercial viability of charge points. And all these are behind the meter applications until now, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Romano. Two good points. The need for us as a country to design market structures to be able to dispatch stored power to the grid. I think that's something that Kenya Power, the regulator needs to pick up, and also look into the viability of doing that. And I think as you're speaking, we can move on to John, because also John has deployed something similar in its batteries in their first life, a 60 kilowatt DC charger, which is powered by batteries. So, John, how has this helped address grid reliability or connection challenges in your operations? And also, if you could speak about the EV segment that this charger is addressing, it would be good, because I think I also painted you in a freight space. I wouldn't want people to think a prime mover can be charged by a 60 kilowatt DC charger. I think you'd take 2 days. Huh?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that question, Robert. When you're installing a charger, there are three main costs. So you have the costs from behind the meter up to the transformer. You have the costs from the meter to the charging point, and then you have the cost of the charger. Depending on, because each site is different, you might find, let's say, like the cost from the meter to the transformer can be anything, maybe even 40%, 50%, right? The charger that we have installed is a battery-powered 60 kilowatt DC charger, as Robert has said. What that has allowed us to do is, in effect, remove the cost for the transformer. So basically, what we did was that we connected it to an existing 3-phase supply, 32 amps. Yes. So this is how basically the architecture works. From the mains, powers the battery. Battery is a 60 kilowatt, powers it up for about 3 hours. Then now goes to the output. We can just output it in 1 hour. What we're looking at now is just running it and looking at the economics. We have installed it it's actually installed in Nairobi. We don't have enough data yet to be able to see. But as Romano has said, once we're able to run it for about 3 months, 6 months, we'll have enough data and we'll see, is this viable? Yes. And the target market for that is, we're looking at mainly taxis. because taxis have a smaller battery. To Robert's second question in terms of freight. Kabisa has an extremely audacious plan. The audacious plan that we have is that we actually want to electrify the whole fleet sector. So we are looking at putting chargers all the way from Mombasa to Kigali. We have not yet put up any charger on that route. But interestingly enough, we have put up chargers on the central corridor. We started last year by bringing in a fully electric prime mover. The fully electric prime mover has a battery of about 400 kilowatt hour. That's the size of the battery. We gave it to our clients, Ox. I think everyone knows Ox. We told them, please test this product out. We don't want to give it to the market before. We are friends. If it has problems, you can let us know. After the testing period, we were like, okay, has it worked well? They're like, yes, it has worked well. Yeah, could you please give it back to us? No. Here's your money. And we're like, no, we still need it. We need to show other clients. We're going to order 10 of them. And so they ordered 10 of them. Now, we have talked a lot about policy, and I will not talk a lot about policy, but I think it's important to talk about it because of the opportunities that the country can miss. We bring in all our goods and everything to Kigali using the Dar es Salaam border. The Dar es Salaam port. And so now, the company's plan was to be able to do the northern corridor, which was from Mombasa all the way to Kigali. But because of this Ox order, we've ended up putting up chargers on the central corridor. So now we have charging stations, and we literally delivered the last trucks about a month ago. So now we have chargers across from Dar es Salaam all the way up to Kigali. Food for thought. Yeah. So and those are the kind of things that we're grappling with. If we have clarity, I'm very, very sure that the private sector will do their part. Thank you.
Thank you, John. You've brought us all the way from a discussion on your 60 kilowatt DC charger for small taxis to understanding the landscape in Kenya, and also throwing the ball back at us as Kenya. John operates in Kenya, but the operations mostly, or where the traction is in Rwanda because of obvious reasons that he spoke about. But what is quite interesting is the track that he's spoken about, the 400 kilowatt prime mover. I think as I move into the next question for Mugambi, because this is important. When we start talking about freight electrification, we are talking about even megawatt charging level, which already has been done, I think, in China. There are 700 kilowatt chargers that have been availed for freight electrification. And now the question is, how ready are we? I think also I wish you'd have mentioned how ready Tanzania was, how you chose the sites, but I think we don't have time for that because that is critically as important. You can imagine if we electrify our northern corridor, which as a corridor, to be honest, they did their green freight strategy, which identifies freight electrifications as one of the pillars of decarbonization. But to Mugambi, having heard what John has said about the trucks he wants to introduce into the market. So how is the utility planning for high density charging? And are there any specific grid upgrades or dedicated connections being considered for fleet hubs?
Thank you, Engineer. Thank you for the question. Where do I start? One, it's a very difficult to answer a question when a subject matter expert is in the room. And in terms of, but I would wish to say that we have started, or rather over time now, since we have started moving, we have started with talking with the industry to have incorporating the load, the planning in terms of high density charging. One is that there are studies, various studies going on to be able to determine exactly where these loans will be. It is one thing to have the overview of what kind of loans you will require, say the 20,000 vehicles I mentioned, and to know exactly at which point that load will be required. So that is something which is ongoing in various forums. One, the planning, urban planning are looking at it. The Ministry of Transport is looking at their plans. The utility is also looking at it. But more important is how do we ever determine exactly where we need the utility to upgrade its network. And that goes into the planning. So there is a lot of sources of data which are being considered and studies going on through various forums to be able to determine exactly where these load points will be, so that the people planning for the grid can be able to accommodate those high density charging. Very recently, we had an inquiry from a player from the private sector looking at putting chargers between Mombasa and Nairobi. And they actually came and had a session with our teams in a central office on this. But the primary thing is, how do we ever end up knowing exactly where these loans will be? Currently, through dedicated designs, because the small loans like the swap stations are able to easily to be accommodated within our existing network. It is actually, especially in the rural side, I mentioned something earlier that last year, a year back, we had e-mobility in about 5 counties, Mombasa specifically, Nairobi, Machakos, Kiambu. Today, we are talking about 37 counties across the country having e-mobility players already operating those sites. Most of the loans are coming from two-wheelers, and those ones are easily accommodated because we need maybe up to 20 kVA. And most of the rural transformers are under capacity in terms of that. So there is a lot of improvement in the grid load factor taking place in the countryside. But when we come to urban areas, most of this last mile infrastructure is operating at scale. And for all charging stations, especially for the four-wheelers where John is involved, these are actually bespoke designs for each and every station. So actually the transformers he mentioned, all the way from the feeder, the transformer and the last mile connection is actually designed for each and every application. But behind that transformer, I think I will request Engineer Naomi, who is in the room, who is in charge of distribution planning at the utility. Have we to be able to answer this question better? What are we really doing in terms of planning for the grid at the last? So, Engineer Naomi, I'll give you this opportunity just to say one or two on our planning outside what the customer is taking care of. Is there an extra microphone?
Engineer Naomi, this is the time to shine. To say how without you, Kenya Power is not going anywhere.
Sorry for the ambush, but subject matter expert in the room.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Mugambi. I actually have my session right alone on planning. So I don't know whether we can answer that question that time or answer now, but generally the system is very ready. We've invested heavily on the substations. Even, is it yesterday when the president commissioned the line between Sondru and Homa Bay, which is Ndiwa? So we are ready. We can say that the system is ready. And as John said, charging does not stress the grid, because most of the charging happens when we are asleep. So thank you, Mugambi. I have my session. Maybe I'll answer more that time.
So just to wrap up is that the fact that we also have regulations which came out from EPRA on the connection and the requirement for connection. You realize most of them are looking at dedicated transformers and dedicated last mile infrastructure to allow delivery to these changes. So as engineer has mentioned, behind that, she's also taking care of it in terms of the grid planning. But what are we really looking at? There are few items which are missing. For example, when we talk about charging depots, it would be much better if we had some standardized depots, so that as we plan for them, we know that if you are setting up this size of a charge station, this is the infrastructure which will be required. So we can have various scales of these charging depots, which are standardized through regulation, so that even the energy space, the utility, and the other people in this space can be able to plan through a predictable and a well-planned. We are also looking at issues to do with what solutions do we have. We mentioned what the other team members here have mentioned, the issue of storage. Also, John has mentioned they are already doing it, whereby they are charging a battery. The question which I would ask, and which most probably the industry and we need to discuss going forward, is with the time of use tariff we have at the moment, does it allow for us to actually use it to shift load? Because that would be a good solution towards taking care of the loans which come during peak. We would be able to transfer that load, but the regulations currently are not very clear on such an aspects. So that's one of the areas I think we are looking at going forward as we discuss these things. The use of hybrid stations, on-site battery storage, definitely would also help to shift the load and smoothen this curve. But at the moment, I wish to assure you, as Naomi has mentioned, that the utility is factoring in these high-density loans within its planning, and the fact that also through various forums, the players, government infrastructure and government machinery, departments, transport, the urban planning teams, Nairobi County and other cities are also incorporating this so that we can be able to better plan for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Mugambi and Engineer Naomi. And just two things. It's good to that you've highlighted 37 counties in Kenya have an element of e-mobility, and planning is there. Right now, mostly it's in the 2- and 3-wheeler space, and how that has improved the grid factor. John wants to add something, and as he adds that something, I wish John one day would bring the prime mover and park it here and charge it along this line on Limuru Road. Then we see whether we'll have power interruptions. Then this fact by Kenya Power would have been tested by practice. Welcome, John.
Thank you. On the prime mover, I might be jumping the gun a bit, but it's almost confirmed the prime mover will be in Nairobi in May. Yeah, so please follow me on your socials, and it would be good to be able to actually show. It would be good to test it out. I am sure Kenya Power will pass the test.
Thank you, John.
I just wanted to add as well. Coming from the energy side, when we look at the vehicles, we always look at it from just the amount of kilowatts that it takes. And I always used to describe electric vehicles as big batteries on wheels. That was my description of them. There are a lot more nuances, and which make it extremely complicated to be able to plan out. Mr. Mugambi won't say, but he controls the fleet of vehicles. Anywhere you see a Kenya Power thing, he's the one. It is very complicated. I think that is the thing. It is not just a simple planning of this is where it is going to be and this is where it's going to be. You need to look at things like driver patterns, driver behavior. It is a bit more complicated than that, yeah.
Thank you, John. So in May, we're expecting a prime mover from Kabisa. And I know of 2 other prime movers which are coming sometime this year. So we'll bring them here and they will, or maybe in the next ISA conference, and charge them as the conference is going on. Then we see whether Village Market will have a blackout. Anyway, I think because of time, we'll go into the last round of questions, but we'll keep the answers short. So I'll start with Dr. Gladys. So how can circular economy principles create additional revenue streams, for example, through battery reuse and recycling in EV value chains?
Thank you, Engineer. I think to keep it short, when we're doing our work at SEPREC, the question we're asking ourselves is, how are we making these attractive, repurposing, reuse, recycling of second life batteries? So what we have found out over and over again is that there is the price of natural capital that we are not actually attaching to this whole circularity conversation. And so because of that, we are not able to make it commercially viable for private sector to take it up or to champion it and say that, if we attach a price to the environment, to our people from the perspective of standards especially, we are not able to see the profits that come out of repurposing second life batteries. We are trying as much as possible to review and experiment on this, but to come outright and say that this is commercially viable would be pretentious. So I look at second life batteries as a multi-stage asset in the whole value chain. And this means that we want to look at from the point of collection. So I know that there is an issue of diagnostics, especially the state of health of these batteries. There is no regulation really. So if I tell you this is a battery that can be extended its life, according to who? So there is that issue of who makes it valuable. Then financing that when you're asking people to bring back the battery. Yesterday in a panel, someone said Kenyans, we love owning everything. We don't like leasing. So how do we make that valuable? How do you make the 2-3-wheeler person understand that actually they don't need to own these packs of batteries and that there is a value proposition to them returning these? So from the business models that have arisen so far, battery as a service, storage as a service, and the hybrid models, we have to try and, as stakeholders, see what works for our market. So the shift from global EV thinking in terms of business models might have to change and contextualize it, especially for sub-Saharan Africa. And I keep saying that, circularity is not new to us. Even when we are talking about transport in the state, it is we are second-hand countries. No offense, but we've been in circularity, so to speak. So it's not a new concept. And so we can try to attach now the value to it, monetary value to it, to make it attractive in the end. So to add to the other three components that I had spoken about, where we are talking about critical minerals recovery, battery repair and manufacturing, I think Romano and other stakeholders are spearheading skills development in that, because we currently have a shortage in as much as we are seeing demand. We also need local capacity in terms of who will be doing repairs and manufacturing of these batteries. So in the end, we also see the transport sector actually, it being currently a hard to abate sector. In the future, we see that with this skills capacity, we see a very good transition trajectory into the green space.
Thank you, Dr. Gladys. I think I was listening to you up until you called dumping of vehicles in Africa, you called it circularity. So we are in circularity and we're not receiving dumped vehicles. I will take that home. On the business models that you've spoken about, a quick one to Romano. Which charging business model is proving most viable in Kenya today? Public charging, depot charging, or charging as a service?
All. They're all thriving out there. Public charging is critical for many public service operators. I think public transport is one of the commercially viable electrification businesses, and it is supported by public charging. We provide already, together with Kabisa here, a public charging network. So that is already commercially viable. Also, institutions as well as, and I'm sure Kenya Power has done this already, has put out what is already the first national network, if I may call it, where chargers are being deployed across many different regions. So all these are already viable, and they complement each other, and different charging strategies are deployed. So it's not one specific. For public transport systems, public charging is very critical, even though it is supplemented by other scenarios. And community charging as well, it is also a very interesting strategy out there, which in itself also helps the concept we will want to call democratization of energy. We would like as many people as possible to participate in the charging infrastructure development. It helps, of course, distribute the infrastructure even to the people that are not as close to the commercial opportunity as it might be. So we do hope that it's not going to be a story for those who have capital at hand, but it is rather possibly going to be a story for an open platform that can support high capacity charging infrastructure, as well as even low capacity distributed decentralized infrastructure. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Romano. To the final question to Sheila. How do integrated models combine solar storage and EV charging improve project bankability in the Kenyan C&I sector?
Thank you, engineer. When we look at investors in the market, doing a project with storage at the moment becomes really hard to predict when they will get their internal rate of return. So it becomes really hard, especially when it comes to consumers. You know, you cannot tell a consumer to consume more so that you can get your money back on time. So when we have EVs, make it predictable, because at the moment you look at a car has a capacity of 4 kilowatt hour, and definitely with that you can be able to predict your IRR. So it's with the prediction of these, and also with the fact that you can be able to come up with structures where you can get contracts with the fleet owners, get contracts with companies like the one that have EVs who have public chargers, in a way that you can give them a rate where when they charge, how much do you charge them per kilowatt hour, which will easily get you your return on investment on time.
Thank you. I think we can wrap up that session. And before we wrap up, given the time constraints, I'll just like to highlight a few key points that were really critical from this panel that they spoke about. There's the need, which Mugambi talked about, there's a need for planning for generation, distribution, and transmission. And he also mentioned that Kenya Power is actively planning on this. There was a point by John that e-mobility does not stress the grid, and actually it is an enabler of demand. Then there was a point which Dr. Gladys talked about on critical minerals, on the need of policy coherence in Second Life conversations. Then Sheila talked about need for regulations in second life aspects. I think that is important, especially in the mini grid space, looking at once a battery has been repurposed, can it be sold to the market and used by another user? Romano spoke about transport, the need for market structures to be able to dispatch stored power to the grid, and need for clarity. And finally, I think this is what I will finish this panel with. Dr. Gladys has said that the vehicle dumping that is happening in Africa, it is not vehicle dumping, it is circularity. So with that, we close this panel. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think we do have a few minutes for Q&A from the audience.
To John, you mentioned deploying easily in East Africa, basically your first pilot through DAR and Rwanda, and I'm wondering, maybe you could just tell a bit of your story. Was it that the permitting, importing, ease of doing business better there than it has been for you to come and now pilot this fleet in Nairobi? Just tell us, because I think there are policymakers, regulators in the room, and where we can learn from that. Same question for Francis. Are tax breaks here and there, or lack of clarity in that policy coherence affecting your operational costs? How are you navigating that? What would you need to scale in terms of an enabling environment? So I'd really like to hear your stories.
I'll start. As an industry, what was the event that the president drove the car? Yes. We were ecstatic as an industry. We organized. I went to State House. We went to State House. We gave our vehicles to the president. The president did something unprecedented. After that, Rwanda released a policy. Ethiopia released a policy. It's a bit disheartening, and I'll be very honest, because we as Kenya are the home of e-mobility on the continent. And it's quite sad to be able to see other countries, quote unquote, really surpass us. But all is not lost. I still think especially on the human capital aspect. I went and, due to my quote unquote expertise, went to a company that was from Rwanda. The person who actually put up the chargers all the way from Dar es Salaam is a Kenyan. So, the government, help us out. Really help us out. Help us out so that we can really. And here's the thing: in this room right now, if I was to tell anyone here that I have a job in e-mobility, everyone will give me a CV. Everyone here will give me a CV and say, there's this young person that I want to give. So we are trying to create these jobs. Government, help us out. Thank you.
I used AI to. This is the answer I got. I'll not tell you the question that I asked. Kenya is innovating faster than most. This we agree. But without coordination and decisive policy, it risks leading in pilots while lagging in real scale. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, related to that question, I was watching Al Gore on a podcast, and he mentioned that Ethiopia has introduced national requirements for EVs. So even on international venues, Kenya is missing out now because we're falling behind on policy. And anyone who knows the Ethiopia situation knows that no e-mobility player internationally, except for a Chinese state organization, wants to work in Ethiopia. But my question to you is, there's a natural market. We've seen the development of the border-borders. We've seen the development of the buses with Bazigo. We haven't seen four-wheelers, and we haven't seen so many taxis. And we haven't seen trucks or lorries. However, given that Kenya is the #1 exporter of cut flowers to Europe, and given that the #1 uptake of C&I solar, which we're here for, has been or one of the major uptakes has been in the flower industry, and they need to deliver flowers to airports. It makes sense that an important market would be the electrification of the delivery of these products to the airport. My question is, what specific policy would you ask the government to implement to make that happen?
Mine goes to Engineer Mugambi. I think Kenya Power is in the business of selling power. And you have this huge fleet that's running on petroleum. I would assume it's probably strategically significant for Kenya Power to just decide we will be high on our own supply and just decide you completely say the entire fleet will be electric because anyway, it's our own power. The staff, you can even tell your staff, for you to work for Kenya Power, electric car, and they can charge for free because there's net metering, and guys from CNI will be giving you 50% of the power that they're giving to the grid. It's yours. You can use that to just charge your vehicles. I know it sounds a bit radical, but I'm assuming within your department and the broader strategy of the company, it's probably possible to even convert the high-up trucks, all these things to e-mobility. Maybe there's some level of effort that's required, but are you already seeing yourselves as Kenya Power saying, we will use our own power, we will just almost go zero on fuel, it's free, as the CNI guys are willing to give you 50% according to the regulation under net metering?
My question is to Mr. Romano, and it's related to circularity. So from a technical perspective, how easy is it to connect these batteries to the conventional inverters and the related equipment. And also, my second question is on maybe if you can comment something on safety of e-mobility, especially in the context of accident evacuation, and especially if there is exposure to high DC voltage. Thank you.
My question is around, I don't know what should I address it to. I think I'll take it with Mr. Mugambi. We are seeing a lot of the petrol stations around beginning to now deploy charging stations for the bikes. At this juncture, there are not too many of them, but I want to believe within the next 3, 4, 5 years, it'll get to the point where almost every single energy station will have some sort of charging bank for a lot of mobility devices. And that looks to me like, those are just that's a big collection of standalone charging infrastructure that could be used possibly for grid support if required, because as an individual unit, maybe not so much, but if you've got a collection of a few hundred, that can make a significant change to how that would work. And I guess maybe the question there is, this also goes across to the other members of the team, of the panel. Over and above Kenya Power sort of helping facilitate that, because I want to say that if the battery is coming out of the power, it should come at a different rate. Because there's an opportunity cost. It's not going to a customer who should have been getting power from that battery. It's going back into the grid, and there should be some charging facility for that. And who then needs to be making that decision? Is that an regulatory conversation? Is that something to be done or negotiated with Kenya Power? I'm a bit curious about how that would work. But I also want to take cognizance of the fact that Mr. Romano said there are complexities that are not immediately obvious, but I believe they can be surmounted.
So I think, Mugambi, you can start. You have bulk of the questions. And you can start with why did you come in an ICE vehicle? And you work for the utility. And just to add, the reason why I'm supporting that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you work in a bank, they usually mandate you to bank in the same bank, yeah? Like your salary, like you can't be in KCB, then your salary, they send it to Stanchart. I don't think they can agree. And if you work at Safaricom, you have to have a Safaricom number. Because when I was young, I interned at Airtel, and all the staff used to have Airtel lines. They would hide and have an M-Pesa line, but they have Airtel lines. So Mugambi, yeah.
Thank you. To join, I would say that fleet transition is much more than waking up in the morning and deciding that we are transitioning. Because there are various strategic decisions you must make along the way. One, choice of fleet, suitability of the fleet. Because unlike in the ice age, I would go to Toyota, buy a Yamaha, and I know that Yamaha will work from Nairobi to Lodwar, to Kakuma, to everywhere in the country. Currently, the electric mobility has changed that. Now we are looking at very specific solutions for specific areas and specific applications. So we started, since we did the first EV mobility, the Kenya Power Mobility Conference, where we started with the issue of the tariff in 2023, if I'm not wrong. We put up the first public charging station, DC station in the country at Estima Plaza. We also started piloting on the EVs to find out whether they will be responsive to our... We work in a very strategic space within this economy that we cannot afford to make mistakes. So we started doing those pilots, and now I am able to say, like on the two-wheeler category, we have made a decision to go, any replacement we are doing now is 100% electric. Nakuru City, we turned all the two-wheelers into electric. The next one, I think, you also have been on the socials recently, we want to turn Mombasa City also electric on the two-wheeler space. We have also piloted enough with our main vehicles, the emergency vehicles which run around. And those ones we are also transitioning. We have looked at the vans which carry people around, staff within the city. And I'm also happy to note that for this month, we have the first 14-seater matatus or vans rolling out of Kenyan assembly lines, both in Mombasa and in Thika. So this is also brought down the costs. The other issue we also need to look is, as I mentioned, the electric mobility solutions are tailor-made. They become viable. Private capital will go to where there is predictable revenues. You can control costs, and also the regulatory risks are minimal. When you look at EVs, it's about the break-even point between ICE and, because you won't leave a cheaper solution to go to a more expensive solution. Right now, we are looking at the energy costs in the country. Kenya Power will not intentionally deploy a more expensive cost into your tariff. So we have looked at that. And now the vehicles which are doing high mileage, we are able to transition them without a second thought, and that has already started happening. I would say that a question was raised, why do we have more vehicles on the commercial side? Because like the two-wheelers, the boda, they already break even at the purchase price of the bike. When you go to taxis, you're able to break even faster because of the mileage you cover in terms of cost and recovery. When you go to buses, similarly. So when you go to commercial vehicles, they are easier to transition because they make economic or financial sense before the private ones. Because for my car, I use it for 5 kilometers to the office and back. If I look at the price differential between ICE and my lifetime, I will not have recovered that cost as a person. So the more we go into sharing of the transport, use of public, even in Europe where we have so much, most of these people are on public transport, and therefore they are able to break even and make a lot of sense in terms of the financial outlay. The other issue which was, so we are transitioning, so two-wheelers, 100%, and the two-wheeler KPLC buys further, going forward is electric. We are looking at the double caps. Similarly, when we look at the trucks, you mentioned IAPs. We don't just pick any lorry in the market. People will wonder why there is only Isuzu, whether we don't buy others. Simply because the technical design and the technical capability of that truck to carry those loads, there is a lot of engineering which goes in choosing that truck. So as soon as a viable truck is available to carry that IAP, we'll be the first people to put it on the road. Thank you.
Yeah, John. John, you can go then. I think the final question was for Romano. Then I think we can wrap up.
Yeah. Okay. There was Mark spoke about flower farms. I'm happy to announce that we actually have a 5-ton refrigerated truck in the country. Literally after this, I'm going to go and pay the insurance. We will start doing pilots from next week. One of the pilots that we're doing will be one of a company that actually does transport from Naivasha to the airport. Another one that we'll be doing will be, so we've lined up about 8 of them. Another one that we'll be doing will be a tea factory in Meru. If you are a C&I player here and you think that there is appetite from your client, happy to actually avail the truck. I think these are the kind of things that we need to be able to do so that people can just understand, this is still new. We're talking about it in a very abstract sort of way, but bringing it down to where the clients where your C&I players can also just interact with it, I think is important to be able to push the industry. So if you have a company and you think that, happy to do that. In terms of, Mark, you also asked in terms of policy. My background is just a bit in solar as well. And you guys know finance bill. It's a problem. You don't know next year. You don't know next year what you're going to charge for panels. And just having that, Mugambi has put it very well. You don't know what it is that you're going to charge a client. Today, you might tell them a price in 4 or 5 months. It's coming, right? It might change. So, I think the main thing would be, if possible, we could actually just have a moratorium. Give us 2 years, 3 years where we know that this is it. If that was to happen, I strongly, strongly believe that a lot of capital will actually be unlocked and it will just flow into Kenya. So over to the policymakers.
Let's add one more question from Njoroge. Then yes.
My name is Njoroge. I'm the chairman of ESAC, and I think John just read my mind. That's the question that I was asking, because my colleague here had asked about what is it that we need to do? What tariffs, what policies do we need to change to make sure that Mugambi, who is saying that private vehicles are not viable, are viable? And this is a good opportunity because the finance bill is just about to be read, John. And I was wondering whether at a conference like this, we should not come up with a real concrete recommendation that we can be able collectively to take to the minister and tell him this is what we have decided. We have discussed and found that for us to be able to continue with the e-mobility, we do need the following things done. And I know as an association, maybe you have done that, but we also have now a collective voice from here, from ESAC, that we can be able to push something that is concrete at a time like this when the finance bill is just about to be read. And also using parliament, because some of those parliamentarians sometimes now are stronger than they can be able to move things much more. Thank you.
If I may answer. So we have the E-Mobility Association of Kenya. It's called EMAC. Being able to actually just understand the bill-making process in Kenya is something that we've had to do over the last 3 years. When you look at, in terms of the tax schedule, unfortunately, there are things that are also governed by the EAC. And so there are certain things that cannot be removed. Yeah. You actually need to take it through MITI, industrialization. After MITI, you then take it to Treasury. After Treasury, then now you take it to EAC. But Rwanda did that process. And so that is a long-term thing that needs to be started and cannot be really implemented in this finance bill. That's number one. But number two, the incentives that we were given by government were to support locally assembled products. And so the incentives that we had were, I will let Romano actually just, because I'm not 100% sure on them. But buses were given incentives, motorcycles were given incentives, and electric bicycles were given incentives. So the push by the association right now for this particular finance bill that is coming up is for it to be included for all vehicles. So we're looking at tuk-tuks, looking at trucks, we're looking at, tuk-tuks and trucks and passenger vehicles, they were excluded. And so what we're looking at specifically is to remove VAT and to remove excise. So the customs duty, which is a function of ESC, will still remain. So we're trying to be realistic in our ask, and that is what we've asked for.
Okay.
As Kabisa, what we're trying to do is, once that has been done, we're trying to go the local assembly route as well. Yeah. So I hope I've answered the
thank you for that. I'll let Romano finish off answering the questions, because I think the time is up, and also I need anyone here who's plugged in a high consuming EV to unplug, because there's an electricity interruption. I think it's the prime mover, maybe it came earlier.
Thanks, Robert. So the gentleman who asked about batteries and vehicles, we are happy to pick that topic even out there and discuss a bit more in details, but for sure there is a lot of skills development and packaging of the technology behind electric vehicles, which we can talk more in detail. So I think those we can respond to. The question of incentives, we have 10% excise duty for four-wheelers. This was done many years ago. Please, let's consider that the request that went was not to request for 10%, but it was the comprehensive fiscal incentives that are necessary to trigger scalability in electric mobility. Through the wisdom of the policymakers, they provided 10%, and we are very thankful for that 10%, which we have 6-7 years later. So it's not that the information is not there, it is there. It has been there for many years. It has been discussed for many years, and it's still not there. So that is really what we need to be aware of. Also, it is not news to the policymaker, because there are many other sectors that have been accelerated in a similar manner. We have the same incentives in education. We do know we have similar incentives in renewable energy. So it is not a different structure. It's a structure that has been used before. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, I think we'll wrap up this session. We can give our panelists a hand of applause.